At the next station was a sign. All trains must wash down daily. James had just finished being cleaned. Now James will need another shower. You'll have to wait your turn till later. Trucks will be trucks, said James. James got ready to take the express when Gordon returned. I don't need help on hills. Even though the storm had passed, the hill was still difficult to climb. James knew that. The signal showed clear and James began to go faster. I'll do it, he puffed. Halfway up, he was not so sure. I must do it. But his wheels slipped on the lever. He couldn't pull the train at all. Help! Whistled James. His wheels were turning forward, but the heavy coaches pulled him backwards. The whole train started slipping down the hill. His driver shut off steam and put on the brakes. We can do it, puffed James. At last, they reached the top. Beep, beep, thank you, goodbye, whistled James. James is a mixed traffic engine. He can pull both trucks and coach. He's proud of his smart red paint, and so is his driver. Everyone says you brighten up their day, James. Look at me. I am the smartest, most useful engine on the line. What? Replied James. You're getting all puffed up. James huffed away. Later, he was still boasting. I'm the pride of the line. James was furious. I pull coaches too. The Fat Controller has plans for me. James was only making this up. Wait and see. Are those coaches for me? Asked James hopefully. But James was going to play a trick on the other engines. Actually, Thomas, I'm taking the coaches. Give them to Gordon. So when James's driver returned, James was coupled to the coaches and James was enjoying himself enormously. What a clever plan, he chuffed. You have caused confusion. Yes, sir, said James. You will stay in your shed until you are wanted. James felt sad. I'm sorry I tricked you, said James. Are these my trucks? James puffed into the harbour with his goods train of trucks. But his driver was wrong. James was most impressed. He steamed along the line as smoothly and as quickly as he could. This clever engine gave me a splendid ride. You must be proud of him. James, once again, you are a really useful engine. James was snorting about in the yard. It's too bad. Percy goes to work at the harbour and I do his job here, there and everywhere. Take that. Oh, what a good idea, agreed James. Look, here comes Thomas. I'll start pretending now. Thomas was sorry to see the engines looking miserable. Yes, he is. I am, stuttered James. I don't feel well at all. In a muddy pond. Later, James spoke to Thomas. I'm sorry about your accident, he muttered. And so is Gordon. We didn't mean to get you into trouble. Well, he sighed.
But the driver and fireman felt sorry for Edward. Next morning, Edward woke up to find nothing had changed. Gordon was still boasting. You watch me, little Edward, as I rush through with the express. That will be a splendid sight for you. Goodbye, little Edward. Look out for me this afternoon. Gordon was very cross. Instead of nice shining coat, he was pulling a lot of very dirty trucks. A goods train, a goods train, a goods train, he grumbled. The shame of it, oh, the shame of it. They found Gordon halfway up and very cross. His driver and fireman were talking to him severely. You're not trying. I can't do it, said Gordon. The noisy trucks hold an engine back so. We've come to push. No use at all, said Gordon. You wait and see, replied Edward's driver. They brought the train back to the bottom of the hill. No good, grumbled Gordon. They pulled and pushed as hard as they could. I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, puffed Gordon. And almost before he realized it, Gordon found himself at the top of the hill. I've done it, I've done it, I've done it, he said proudly. He forgot all about Edward and didn't wait to say thank you.
Mud had blown all over his smart blue paint. Hello, Gordon, called Thomas. You look as if you've had a mud bath. Be a sensible engine. Have a shower instead. Gordon snorted. I haven't time to dawdle over my appearance like fussy little tank engines do. Slow down, called his driver. This made Gordon even crosser. I'll be dirty and late, dirty and late. Come on, Gordon, said his driver. You'll feel better after a good hose down. Pah! said Gordon, and angrily let off steam. Good riddance, huffed Gordon. I'm far too busy to waste time with water. He finished his journey safely and steamed into the big station. Goodness gracious. Gordon was soon being washed. Mind my eyes, he grumbled. Then he pulled trucks for the rest of the day. He bumped them hard. That's for you, and you, and you. They won't with me, snorted Gordon. I'll teach them. Be careful, warned Gordon. The hills are slippery and you may need help. Gordon thinks he knows everything. Gordon saw everything. Ah, well, we live and learn. Never mind, little James. I'm going to push behind. Clouds of smoke and steam towered from the snorting engines. We will do it, puffed Gordon. Poop, poop, answered Gordon. Goodbye. That night, the Fat Controller came to see the engine. Please, sir, said Thomas, can Gordon pull coaches again now? If you understand that having a good washdown is essential to every engine, then yes, Gordon, you may, grunted Gordon. The other engines settled happily to sleep. Dirty or clean, I'm a famous machine, murmured Gordon, but no one heard. Later, he was still boasting. I saw you pulling trucks today. You're only a goods engine, snorted Gordon. Not as much as I do, grunted Gordon. What plan? Oh dear, thought James. Now what'll I do? A few minutes later, Gordon arrived. Where's the express? Gordon laughed. I'll tell you what, James, if you pretended to be ill everywhere, you couldn't shunt trucks here or go to the quarry there, could you? Yes, grumbled Gordon, but not for James. What's the matter? He's sick, replied Gordon. No, indeed, spluttered Gordon. A mere misunderstanding, Thomas. All's well that ends well. Gordon and James puffed silently away to the shed. But Thomas still had company. The toad, who was looking forward to a ride home, noisily agreed.
Donald and Douglas are twins and had arrived from Scotland to help Sir Topham Hatt. But only one engine had been expected. The twins meant well, but did cause confusion. Sir Topham Hatt had given them numbers. Donald 9. His trains were late, and he was blamed. Donald, his twin, was angry. "You're a muckle nuisance," said Donald. "It's to leave you behind I be wanting." "You can't," said the brake van. "I'm essential." "Ah, are you?" Donald burst out. "You're nothing but a screeching and a noise when all's said and done. Spite doggy, would you? Take that!" "Oh! Oh!" cried the van. "There's more coming should you misbehave." The van behaved better after that. Until one day, Donald had an accident. Donald wasn't hurt, but Sir Topham Hatt was most annoyed. Sir Topham Hatt was right. James grumbled dreadfully about extra work. "I hear tell about an engine and some tar wagon." "James is cross," snickered the spiteful brake van. "We'll try to make him crosser still." "Hold back," giggled the freight cars to each other. James did his best, but he was exhausted when they reached Edward's station. Luckily, Douglas was there, but James was losing steam. "I can't do it! I can't do it!" The conductor was anxious. "Go steady! The van's breaking!" The van was in pieces. No one had been hurt, and soon Edward came to clear the mess. Sir Topham Hatt was on board.
They nearly always worked together. Down the line, Trevor the traction engine, Donald could see the cart. "Stop!" he cried. Donald's driver applied the brakes, but it was too late. Luckily, no one was hurt. "Stop being pushy," Donald snapped. Before long, the track was cleared, and Donald and Douglas were on their way. "May I go, sir?" said Donald eagerly. At first, Donald enjoyed working with Duck. Then, things started to go wrong. Douglas was working on his own. He chuffed dutifully through the beautiful countryside. But Douglas had no one to share it with. Although he tried not to, he was beginning to miss his twin. The next day, Donald was in a bad mood. Duck could see he was getting too close to the buffers. "Look out!" he shouted. But it was too late. Donald's driver was very cross. "This wouldn't have happened if you were working with Douglas," he said. Donald knew he was right. And Duck knew he couldn't pull Donald back onto the rails. So he went for help. "Thank you," Donald said. "And I'm sorry."
And Douglas 10, but he was still planning to send one engine home. There was a brake van in the yard that had taken a dislike to Douglas. Things always went wrong when he had to take it out. Douglas began to worry. "I had decided to send Douglas back and keep you." I'm sorry, sir. I should think so, too. You have upset my arrangements. Anyone would think, said Douglas, that Donald had had his accident on purpose. Well, well, well. Surely, James, it wasn't you. You didn't say. Help me up the hill, please, panted James. These freight cars are playing tricks. We'll show them, said Douglas. Slowly but surely, the snorting engines forced the freight cars up the hill. Leave it to me, shouted Douglas. Go steady. The van's breaking. Sir Topham Hatt was on board. I might have known it would be Douglas, he said. Douglas was grand, sir, said Edward, but Douglas worked hard enough for 3. I heard him from my yard. I want to be fair, Douglas, but I don't know. I really don't know. Sir Topham Hatt was making up his mind about which engine to send away, but that's another story.
Donald and Douglas are Scottish twin engines. They're practical, peppery and proud. They nearly always work together. One day, Donald and Douglas were chuffing through the countryside, hauling a heavy load. Don't call me pushy, Douglas snapped back. You shouldn't have pushed me into the cart, huffed Donald. You pulled me, you mean, argued Douglas. Didn't he? Did too. But the twins were so cross, they refused to speak to each other for the rest of the day. I only need 1 engine, said the Fat Controller, not 2. I am only 1 engine, sir, said Donald, and I would like to work with Duck. He asked. I know I'd miss Annie and Clarabelle. I'll work better on my own, sniffed Douglas. I have work to do, huffed Donald. Douglas would have known what I meant, he huffed. Douglas was working on his own. That night, Douglas's driver took him to visit Donald. I was just passing, said Douglas. Have you come to say you're sorry? Donald sniffed. This made Douglas very cross. I've nothing to be sorry for, he said, and steamed away in a huff. Douglas was sadly finishing his work as Duck steamed into the depot. Donald in trouble, Douglas cried. I'm on my way, and he steamed off as fast as he could. Douglas struggled and struggled. He finally pulled his twin gently back onto the tracks. He was relieved Donald wasn't hurt. And I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, said Douglas. I'm sorry, insisted Donald, and they were.
Henry the Green Engine has lived on the island of Sodor for many years. He wouldn't want to be anywhere else. He likes every part of it, from the fields filled with flowers to the white sandy beaches. But there is one place that Henry always enjoyed visiting more than any other. His driver knew this too. Come on, Henry, he would say. We've made good time today. We'll stop for a while by the forest. Henry loved it here. The forest was full of broad oaks and tall pines. Henry could remember the day long ago when he and Toby brought some new trees to be planted and Terence and Trevor helped haul them into place. Now he could see the trees growing amongst the others on the hillside. Henry always felt better for being here. He couldn't really explain why, but his driver understood. It's peaceful, he said to Henry. But one night, everything changed, except Henry. I hope the wind won't harm the forest. By morning, the fierce winds had gone, but the damage was done. Henry's driver came to see him in the yard. Trees have fallen on the line. We must help clear the track. Donald set off with the breakdown train, and Henry followed. Trees lay everywhere. The hillside now looked so bare. Henry felt sad. What will happen to all the animals who live here, he thought. When Henry's flat trucks were full of logs, he took them to the timber mill, where they would be turned into furniture and other things. Henry was glad the wood was being put to good use, but he was still sorry to lose part of his forest. When Henry returned, he was most surprised. There were Trevor and Terence busily helping the workmen clear the torn stumps and branches. Look, Henry! Now Henry can see the trees growing strong and tall, and the animals are coming back. Sometimes everywhere is quiet. At other times, Henry can hear leaves rustling or a bird's wing brushing the air. Often he can hear the sound of children laughing, and always he is happy. The main line train was late. At last, Henry arrived. Sorry, he puffed. The mail boat from the mainland was delayed. Come on, Percy, said his driver. Let's make up for lost time.
At last Henry came. "Oh dear, my system is out of order. No one understands my case. You don't know what I suffer," moaned Henry.
It was summertime on the island of Sodor. All the engines were very busy. They carried freight and passengers up and down the line. "Emily, you will pull the flour mill special." "Thank you, sir," said Emily. She was pleased. Emily stopped to fill up with water on the way to the flour mill, but James was already there. "Sir Topham Hatt has given me the flour mill special," said Emily. "You're lucky. I have to do the Black Lock run." "Why don't you like going to Black Lock?" asked Emily. "There are boulders all over the tracks," he moaned. "They bash your buffers and scratch your paint. And there's the Black Lock Monster." "What's the Black Lock Monster?" "Nobody knows," said James. "Black figures move in the water and then they disappear." Oh. Emily was pleased she didn't have to go to Black Lock. At the flour mill, the flour had been loaded onto trucks. Emily was coupled up. Then she puffed across the countryside to Knapford Station. Emily pulled as hard as she could, but the troublesome trucks made her go very slowly, so there would be no fresh bread that day. Sir Topham Hatt was cross. "This means I won't have any toast or muffins for breakfast. If you are late again, you will have to do the Black Lock run instead of Jane." Emily didn't want to have her buffers bashed by boulders, and she didn't want to see the Black Lock Monster. "I must get the flour to the station on time." So Emily puffed quickly away. But only half the troublesome trucks went with her. Emily arrived at the station. "But you've only brought half the flour," the station master cried. So Emily had to go back for the rest of the troublesome trucks. "Oh no!" Emily cried. "I don't want to get the Black Lock run." When Emily arrived at the mill, the trucks were more troublesome than ever. "Emily, delayed engine! Emily, delayed engine!" they sang. This made Emily very cross, and she biffed them very hard. "Oh no!" they cried, and they splashed into the duck pond. Emily was covered in a floury mess. That evening, "Emily, you have caused confusion and delay." Emily was very unhappy. "Wait until you've tried it." "I don't think so," Emily moaned. "Bashed buffers and a big monster? It sounds miserable to me." The next morning, Emily puffed sadly to the station. Lots of excited children and vacationers climbed on board. They're all looking forward to their vacation, she thought. I mustn't let them down. Soon Emily was steaming up hills and through valleys. "I bet it won't last," she said to herself. Emily reached the murky waters of Black Lock. "That's where the monster's supposed to be," she puffed nervously. Rocks fell and blocked the line. "Oh no!" Emily had to wait for help. "I knew I wouldn't like this route," she huffed. Suddenly she saw something dark and mysterious moving in the water. "And now the monster's coming!" Emily gasped. Emily was scared. Her boiler quivered and her valves rattled. She wanted to steam away. "I never want to see Black Lock again," she cried. But Emily thought of the children in the coach behind her. She was determined to get them to their vacation whatever it took. And Emily saw what the monster really was. "It's a family of seals!" Emily was delighted. The children were delighted too. Soon the line was cleared. The children would reach their vacation on time. That evening, Thomas and Emily both stopped to watch the seals. "You were right," said Emily. "Black Lock is a nice route after all." Emily and the garbage. Emily is a grand green engine. She's very proud of her big wheels and her perfect polished paint. One morning, Emily was very excited. Sir Topham Hatt had told her to work with a new engine. "I hope he's smart and useful," she wished. Emily met Thomas waiting at a signal. "I can't wait to meet him," puffed Emily, and she chuffed away as fast as her boiler could bubble. Emily steamed into the shunting yards to look for the new engine. He was the dirtiest little engine she had ever seen. Emily was horrified. Emily was very embarrassed. She hurried away. Whiff puffed after her. Emily was tired of being teased. "I must get away from Whiff," she huffed. Emily pumped her piston, but Emily wasn't going to wait for Whiff. And soon, Whiff was a long way behind. Emily was glad Whiff had gone. It's not my fault he can't keep up, she huffed. Up ahead, Emily saw a branch line. Maybe if I puff down here, Whiff won't see me. Emily chuffed all around Sir Topham Hatt's railway. She tried to hide from Whiff in every tunnel and in every siding. At last, Emily escaped from Whiff. Thank goodness, she wished. Now no one will laugh at me for working with such a smelly engine. Flatten my funnel, steamed Emily. Emily knew that was her job. Oh, I suppose I'll have to move them. Ugh, she shuddered. Emily buffered up. She pulled as hard as she could. Just then, Gordon chuffed past. Can you help me move these garbage wagons? Tooted Emily. Can you help me move these garbage wagons, James? Peeped Emily. Emily was upset. He wanted to be my friend, but I wasn't kind to him. I must find Whiff and say sorry. Emily looked high and low for Whiff, but he was nowhere to be seen. I'm sorry, I ran away from you, puffed Emily. Don't worry, Spencer, tooted Emily. We're going to move them together, chuffed Emily. I know, and he's my new good friend, too.
Duck could see he was getting too close to the buffers, and Duck knew he couldn't pull Donald back onto the rail. Donald's in trouble, said Duck. You don't have to have a row about who's sorry, chuckled Duck. Just be glad you're back together. You said you wanted him on the other line, Duck replied.
Do you know what? What? Do you know what? Silly, if you don't tell me what is. If you worked more and chattered less, this yard would be a sweeter, a better, and a happier place. Percy went off to fetch some coaches. That stupid old signal, he thought. He was remembering the time he'd misunderstood a signal and gone backwards instead of forward. No one listens to me now. They think I'm a silly little engine and order me about. I'll show them. But he didn't know how, and unhappy. You look the right way up to me, laughed Sir Topham Hatt. Cheer up. The new engine is bigger than you and can probably do the work alone. Would you like to help build my new harbor? Thomas and Toby will help too. What's your name? Montague, sir, but I'm usually called Duck. They say I waddle. I don't really, sir, but I like Duck better than Montague. Good. Duck it shall be. The two engines went off together. Soon they were very busy. Quack! 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 Wheesh! Smoke billowed everywhere, but Duck took no notice. They'll get tired of it soon. Do they tell you to do things, Percy? Yes, they do. Right, said Duck. We'll soon stop that nonsense. He whispered something. We'll do it later. Wheesh! Duck and Percy calmly sat on the switches outside the shed. Stop that noise! Beg pardon, sir, but I'm a great Western engine. We do our work without fuss. But begging your pardon, sir, Percy and I would be glad if you would inform these engines that we only take orders from you. Percy and Duck, I am pleased with your work today. Duck is quite right. This is my railway, and I give the orders. He did so easily.
Oliver and his brake van Toad liked working in the big yards, but one morning Toad noticed that Oliver was unhappy. He decided to find out why. Excuse me, Mr. Oliver, it seems to me that things are not well with you, if you forgive me for mentioning it. You're quite right, Toad, replied Oliver. All I do is shunt these trucks onto the turntable. I long for a nice run. It's what an engine really needs. Quite so, Mr. Oliver. May I suggest that you speak to the Fat Controller about your problems? Oliver just grew unhappier, and he was rough with the trucks. Percy's far too busy to be bothered with the likes of you, and he bumped the trucks hard. That night, the Fat Controller came to see Oliver in his shed. Oliver, you have caused confusion. Maybe the night air will clear your smoke box. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir, said Oliver sadly. Cheer up, old chap, said his driver. The mail train run is a grand run for a fine engine like you. Oliver smiled, but he still felt he'd let everyone down. His driver took them along the coastal run with the mail train. The sea was calm, and the fresh air couldn't help but brighten Oliver's spirits. They made good speed until it was time to collect some important mail from Harold the helicopter. Come on, Harold, replied Oliver's driver. Ahead was a red signal light. Oliver didn't realize that the signalman had dozed off waiting for them. Oliver whistled several times, but the signal stayed red. There must be something wrong with that signal. We'll go slowly and stop by the signal box, said his driver. but they never reached it. The points before the signal box were switched to an old track. They were going the wrong way. Oliver's fireman was concerned. We need to find a water tower soon. Instead, they saw an old rundown station. Disaster lay ahead. Meanwhile, the Fat Controller was very worried. Oliver has not returned. We had better send out a search party. Soon he was high in the sky with Harold. It wasn't Oliver's fault, sighed the driver. Then he saw something. He went to inspect it. When he returned, he spoke to Oliver. Oliver, you have found another attraction for our island. Sighed Oliver happily. Getting lost can be interesting, but being found is much nicer, especially when it makes an engine feel really useful.
On a clear day when the sky is blue and there's just enough breeze to blow the clouds away, you can stand on the big hill above the valley and watch Duck and Oliver far below, busily at work on Duck's branch line near the sea. The two engines are very proud of their matching coats of gleaming color. Oliver often talks about the time that Douglas saved him from scrap.
If it wasn't for his help,
Oliver will say,
I might have been caught when I ran away from the scrapyard, and I would never have come to live here on Sir Topham Hatt's railway.
What does that mean? Whispered. I think, replied Thomas, it's about being clever and wise. I'm sorry to say that Oliver became very puffed up in the smoke box.
Henry says I'm amazing. He's right.
He whistled as he swooshed along the line.
You are doing well. Now you must learn how to look after freight cars. You think I can't manage, he said huffily. Gordon knows better. He says I'm sagacious.
Oliver pulled some loaded cars to a siding and pushed the empties to the chute. Then he came back to take the loaded cars away. But they were comfortable and didn't want to move.
Or Douglas! Look sharp,
puffed Oliver.
That's not the way to speak, hissed the cars. We'll get even.
Oliver heard nothing. The cars moved smoothly at first, then suddenly Oliver felt them push forward. His driver applied the brakes, but they were useless against the surging cars. On, yelled the cars. Oliver fought hard, but still they forced him on and on. At last, the cars grew tired.
I'm winning,
gasped Oliver, but it was too late. Bunker down in the turntable well.
Beg pardon, but we really don't like this sort of surprise.
That evening, Oliver was hauled gently to safety.
I'm sorry, sir,
he said to Sir Topham Hatt.
I should have listened to Duck's advice. I don't feel good gracious or whatever it is. I just feel silly. Yes, I do, sir. I look like a load of scrap iron. Oh, I don't think so. But you do need to go to the works to be mended. The branch line won't be the same without you, whistled Duck. Come back soon.
He was a wiser engine, too, and never made a mistake about cars again.